Hey y'all, thanks for stopping by. So, over the last month, I've been seeing an increasing trend of programs and websites wanting you to submit your ID so you can access their services. They want you to prove that you're an adult or of age before you can use the website to its full potential. This started with those blanket pornography bans that, depending on your country or your state that you live in, these probably have already affected you. Mostly all this has done is caused a boost in VPN sales and downloads, but I digress. This trend is ongoing and ever increasing, and now it's getting into services that you might find confusing to require an ID, like listening to music. Spotify, I've heard people getting requested to submit an ID just so you can listen to your favorite songs, and I find that a little crazy. I understand that there's explicit content in some music. When I was a kid, the RIAA finally came out with their parental advisory explicit content label that started getting put in the bottom right corner of all these records, and that was enough. The guy at the record store wasn't carding you for these things, but I don't think the government should have a say as to whether you buy a metal album or a rap record just because it includes content or words that they don't agree with. But on the subject of content that received warning labels in the 90s, now it's video games that are being encroached on with an ID requirement. I saw a post by a culture war provocateur who goes by Pirate Nation claiming that Grand Theft Auto was going to start ID verifications. His post got flagged with a community note because this is specifically about Grand Theft Auto Online and how it is already in effect in the UK. This is regarding a law that passed in 2023 but is now being put into effect in certain content. Namely, with Grand Theft Auto Online, it's stopping you from using the in-game text messaging system, their Snapmatic program, and the in-game text chat that appears on the bottom left of your screen when you're in an online lobby. The speculation with this is that when Grand Theft Auto 6 is fully released and possibly has its own online separate servers, that you will be completely banned from using those services unless you provide an ID to prove that you are the age you need to be to own this game. Some of you are hearing this and you think this is a good idea. You don't want those squeakers in your lobbies. You don't want to have to deal with children in your adult game. And while I agree that these ratings and these labels are on packages for a reason regarding who should be playing this content, the real person who should be responsible for what video games a child is playing is their parent. Kids don't have money. Kids don't have jobs, so they can't buy their own video games. But a parent is giving their child an allowance or buying them birthday and Christmas presents. And the age verification program that was in place when I was a child was my mom and dad telling me, no, you can't have Vice City for Christmas this year. You're only 10. Depending on your age, I'm sure you have fond memories of convincing an older relative or tricking a grandma at the GameStop to buy you Call of Duty or some other M-rated game that was very popular with your schoolmates, but you were not of age to purchase yourself. You essentially had to pass a speech check with not only your relative, but to the person behind the counter so that you could actually get the game you wanted. But there weren't legally binding contracts for this. There wasn't a law in place that if a storefront representative sold a child an M-rated game, that they would be going to jail for that. Maybe they would get fired, maybe they would get job ramifications, but nothing would get you sent to jail for purchasing an M-rated game when you were under the age of 17. And I would say the same thing about playing these games. While I do think the ESRB is a mostly good system and kind of can set the gauges for what sort of content you are taking in at a certain age, I don't think a child or their parents should go to jail for having them read Fight Club when they were in 4th grade. I don't think a parent should go to jail because they let their kid watch John Carpenter's The Thing before they were in middle school. And I don't think you should have to verify with the government before you use a product that you've purchased that you can legally own that product. I think, and I'm sure most of you agree, that passing these sort of laws under the guise of protecting the children is a sham. To me, it seems like these sort of laws only serve to bolster the monitoring information state that we found ourselves in over the past 25 years. You won't even be able to have hobbies in your private life anymore because the government will be able to see what you're doing at all times. I've had some folks tell me that this is because parents don't want to raise their kids anymore, that they don't take any sort of personal responsibility in the life that they've created and raising them in a safe and healthy environment. And I can't really relate to that because my dad actually cared about the video games we were playing. But that's because he enjoyed video games in his personal life. He had a Sega controller that we could not use. That was his personal baby. So my dad at least kind of cared about the hobbies we had as children, about the type of stuff we enjoyed playing. I understand that not every parent is that way, or they're not going to spend as much time with your games as my dad did with ours. But as a parent, it's up to you, not the government, to raise your child, to understand what they're reading or watching or playing, and making your own decisions as to whether or not your kids should be playing this stuff. The ESRB, the RIAA, all of these rating boards that put special guidelines on your movies, books, TVs, video games, songs, whatever, that should be enough. We should not need an extra layer of policing to tell you what you can and cannot listen to. Maybe teach your kids that it's a rite of passage, that once you reach a certain age, that means you can watch this stuff now. I personally was great at self-policing and didn't watch Goosebumps until I turned 7 because it was rated Y7 and it felt like it was a goal to reach just so I could have more stuff to read, watch, play, whatever you want to look at. But putting the onus on the government or these private corporations to collect your government ID to make sure that you're allowed to use their products, this is the worst decision in a lifetime of terrible decisions that I've seen people make under the guise of just protecting the kids. But I guess until you have to provide government ID to buy Kinder eggs, y'all try to have a good day.